Politicians often talk about affordability, but a new book reveals how their policies often fuel higher property values and make homes actually less affordable. I don't want to talk about that, but we do. I'm joined at the desk, Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, who wrote the book, Why Property Values Rise. Good to see you, sir.
Well, it's good to be here talking about real estate issues.
And also talking about the politicians' topic that they don't want to talk about here as well. Why did you decide to write the book?
Because I think the secret source of success for people with real estate, whether as homeowners or as property investors, is understanding why property values rise, but more particularly why property values rise more in some areas other than others, why there are outperformers and how they're created. So I thought that
this is the book
we're writing about.
Why Property Values Rise by Terry Ryder, as we say. When you look at something like this, what are the key points that you wanted to put in the book?
I wanted to explain to people what it is that drives property values ever upwards, because a lot of economists rage against it. They say it can't possibly happen. We've got this growing separation between wages and property values.
We've been hearing that for 15, 20 years, right?
That's right. And quite often there have been predictions saying property values can't rise for the next 10 years because there's been such a great separation. The multiple has got too high, but yet property values continue to rise. And even right now this year, this month, we've seen the latest figures came out today, in fact, showing that in the last month, the last quarter, last year, property prices rose in every capital city and every state regional market jurisdiction in Australia.
Wow, it's great, isn't it? You can be an economist paid quite well by your bank and you can stay there a long time and just get everything wrong all the time. It's been an ongoing thing. Talk to us about, I guess, what you believe politicians really want when it comes to property values.
Well, I think actually they've got bigger priorities in dealing with housing affordability, despite what they say. But I do think they have vested interest in property values being high and continuing to rise. I think there's three main ones. The first one is that many of our major political leaders have property portfolios.
Yes.
Including notably...
The Prime Minister has a beautiful new house by the beach. She doesn't want it to go down.
That's right, and he has other million-dollar properties that he's got rented out. So that's one reason they've got a vested interest that's personal in property values rising. But they also understand that 2/3 of Australian households own their homes and they're happiest if their property values are rising. So that's another reason why I think politicians feel that, look, we don't really want to bring down property values because that's going to make the majority of Australian households unhappy. But the third and biggest reason is that every year Australian governments rip $100 billion, more than $100 billion, out of the housing industry in taxes. Stamp duty, land tax, capital gains tax. It's cocaine to governments. They love it. And the more property values rise, the more they get their cocaine hit from the property industry.
Well, it was the Bracks era where they discovered in Victoria that the whole idea of stamp duty was going to underpin the entire economy for them. And as we know, in these non-mining states, it is very important, the power of property. But it feels like what we're talking about here is there's a little bit of gaslighting going on for younger people, younger voters and first home buyers, being told in every budget, we've got something for you. But as you're pointing out, the unintended, perhaps intended consequence, prices go up.
Yeah, well, they keep saying how much they care about affordability and the housing crisis and the shortage, but every decision they make, every policy they introduce makes it worse, not better. And we've been having this debate, not for years, but for decades. It only ever gets worse. You know, their policies actually fuel demand at a time of chronic shortage. And we've seen this week the introduction of the new federal scheme, which is designed to, in inverted commas, help first home buyers, which is a scheme which means you can get into the market with just a 5% deposit and not have to pay lenders' mortgage insurance. And that's going to fuel massive new demand from first home buyers, and they'll feel pretty good that they get into the market. But it's going to put huge upward pressure on prices, again, still more at a time when we have this chronic shortage about which they're doing nothing.
And also frustration about where those first home buyers can actually buy and how far it is from the place where they actually work as well. Yeah. Talk to us about what you see as the biggest myth when it comes to location and value.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of people think that buying in the prime suburbs is where you get the best capital growth. Being close to the CBD is important, but it isn't. You know, what we've seen in the last, say, 5 years, the best capital growth in Australia has been in regional areas, small, diverse, strong regional areas that have some sort of lifestyle element.
Is that because of COVID though? Because the lockdowns meant that people could move to the regions and work outside of the office? And is that changing now that people are being called back?
No, I think that's one of those media myths. The movement I call the exodus to affordable lifestyle has been underway for a lot longer than that. It started maybe 10 years ago. It's predated COVID. It wasn't caused by COVID. It became more visible during the COVID period. And it's still continuing. The latest population data analysis was out just this week, and it shows that Sydney and Melbourne are still losing population to internal migration massively year by year. The only reason their populations are growing is through overseas migration, which is massive. And that's another problem, another government policy, which is exacerbating.
Let's sit and talk about that, because the government says it isn't the reason, and there's a lot of people who say it isn't that big a deal. Why do you believe that it is leading to increased property prices?
Well, it's not the reason we have the housing crisis, but it's making it worse, because it's bringing in massive additional demand for dwellings at a time when we have a chronic shortage, and we're not dealing with that. The latest figures for building approvals are the lowest in 12 months. We're not building nearly enough. That mythical 1.2 million homes that the federal government said it's going to build in 5 years, it's farcically off the mark. It's never going to happen. We're so far behind the rate that's required that it's never going to be achieved.
All right, we've spoken a fair bit about how governments aren't helping. Is there anything they're doing that is helping?
Nothing I can think of. Look, the biggest single problem, and if we fix this, we can fix pretty much all the other problems, is the cost of creating new dwellings.
Yeah. That's everything, right? You build a tunnel, it's going to cost you billions and then run over billions. They were talking about a roof on the MCG, $6 billion, not going to happen. We're now in this world where things are so expensive, but to fix them, they're telling us we need to bring in overseas labour to help build more dwellings. But funnily enough, those people need to live somewhere.
That's right. So it's sort of two sides of a coin, a double-edged sword. But the problem with the cost of building new homes is that 40 to 50%, depending on where in Australia you are, 40 to 50% of the cost of a house and land package is taxation.
Yeah.
You take the taxation element out, you could be selling brand new homes in Sydney for say $600,000 and in the other cities for much less. That becomes affordable for young couples and other first home buyers. But right now, the cost is massively inflated by taxes, fees and charges.
So it is gaslighting, right? On the one hand, they're trying to help with affordability by doing things like the 5% and also the first home buyers grant that different states and governments do different things. On the other hand, the taxes keep going up and they keep finding different ways to tax, therefore bringing us back to where we were.
Well, it's short-term, as they say it, vote-winning policies like throwing money at first home buyers rather than dealing with the core issues, which is the high cost of everything.
And do you blame the politicians or the bureaucrats behind the scenes in, say, Department of Treasury who come up with these policies?
Well, both, because ultimately it's the politicians whose policies they are. The bureaucrats are culpable for fueling that and giving bad advice, but also the bureaucracy is one of the reasons why it takes so long to build houses. The productivity in the housing industry is now half what it was in the 1990s. It takes twice as long to build a house or get a house built than it did 30 years ago.
The green tape, the red tape.
The red tape, the green tape, it's the bureaucracy, the tinkering with the design of houses. State governments love to change the design. So today we've got houses that are more beautiful, safer, more energy efficient, more accessible to more people, like people in wheelchairs, but they cost twice as much to build and take twice as long to build. And that's the problem. It's
I feel like we're seeing this constant episode of Utopia that Working Dog made for the ABC, and you imagine the conversations that they have there as well. Talk to us about how all of this constant change we are seeing. I mean, budgets come out every year. We've got states and councils and federal. What does the change do to the property market, do you think?
Well, it doesn't help from the viewpoint of tenants and first home buyers. And of course, whether what's happening is good or bad depends on where you sit. I mean, for existing homeowners and existing property owners, all these numbers that are coming out, are great. Values are rising, vacancy rates are falling. We've got record low vacancy rates across Australia in the latest figures. None of these things are improving that politicians have promised to fix. But if you're a young person, a tenant or first home buyer, it's a mini disaster. You can get there if you make compromises and sacrifices, if you have help from your parents, and there are high levels of government assistance, but they're not addressing the core issue, which is the high cost of everything that goes into the housing market.
They very rarely do. Let's bring up that book one last time. When's it available?
It's actually available in the bookstores on the 28th of October.
Well, there you go, 28-day countdown. Congratulations on what you have done. Appreciate your insights, your thoughts, and the fact that you've decided to write a book. Congratulations.
Always a pleasure to be here, Aaron.